right, everybody, if you haven't seen already, the players are sitting down and ready to throw down. Brian Wang on Esper Goryo's, our #1 seed, goes up against Wen Hao Lu, our #3 seed on Amulet Titan. My name is Optimus Tom, and we are about to bring you the finals here of our third and final RCQ of the season at Card Art in Sunnyvale, California. It was 6 rounds of Swiss, 2 rounds of the bracket stage, and now we've reached the finals of everything. Brian on your left, our first seed, and of course I forgot to switch over the rest of the names, but it is going to be Wen Hao over on the right hand side as your third seed. Amulet Titan taking a mulligan as Esper Goryo's looks to be keeping what it's got in its 7. Now this could potentially be a very fast finals, which, to be fair, after 9 rounds of Magic the Gathering, does not sound the most unappetizing. We have a graveyard combo deck against, technically now, a graveyard combo deck, but also just a combo deck in general, as these two literal titans of the format are going to be going head-to-head against one another. I believe both of these players wound up going undefeated in the Swiss, going all the way up to where we are now. As we start off with Brian on the play, it is a fetch, it is a thought seize, it is at least 3 damage being taken here from Brian. In order to do so, it looks like an additional 2 from that shock land, so 15, and on a mulligan to 6. This is going to be a little painful for the Amulet Titan deck. We see a Boreal Grazer, Explore, and Splunking, the cards being thrown out here by Wen Hao. And I don't think that the Boreal Grazer is that threatening. You can set up your Explore that draws a card, but so does Splunking, and Splunking, being the card that can start untapping things, looks to be the most dangerous one currently from the Amulet Titan's hand. That is going to be the one that winds up biting the dust. So quick 5 damage to himself from Brian's side, and that's going to get the enchantment into the graveyard. We are going to see Boseiju being cast, and ooh, Amulet of Vigor right off the top. That wasn't there before. So that's definitely going to change some of the plans that Brian kind of had formulating in his head after that thought seize. All right, half of the namesake part of the deck, the Amulet of Vigor, is in play, allowing for permanents to enter the battlefield untapped instead of tapped, basically. Or enters tapped, but then it untaps. Meanwhile, we see Emperor of Bones, the latest addition to the Esper Goryo's deck. That is a big reason as why we saw Brian winning multiple matches on camera so far. This allows you to exile something at the beginning of combat from your graveyard. You can adapt it, and when you put 1 or more counters on it, you can put a card that was exiled with that trigger into the battlefield under your control. A finality counter, it gains haste, and you sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step. The finality counter, of course, will make it exile, but this is the card that gets a little wonky here because you have Ulamog the Defiler, which is now one of the big fatties to find in this deck. You exile it, it sees itself, it comes in with 10 +1/+1 counters because of its converted mana cost, and it basically wins the game on the spot. We are going to see Wen Hao, however, going through, playing the Explore off of the bounce land here, the Gruul Turf. Winds up bouncing again and finding another Explore. So even though there was a thought seize and a mulligan, he's sitting pretty on 4 cards left in hand. Looks like the Boreal Grazer we saw, I think Simic Growth Chamber, Otawara, and Vesuva. So these Explorers mean that you can hit additional land drops. How are we going to sequence this, though? What do we want our Vesuva to enter as? All right, so Simic Growth Chamber entering on top, just going to wind up bouncing away on our Boseiju. Gets that back into hand, so now we have that to potentially deal with something from Brian's side. We're just going to fetch Surveil. Brian is going to go down to 14. And this, if it flips over into an Ulamog, might be all she wrote. These Surveyor lands are a powerful addition to the Goryo's deck. We're not seeing a big fatty be immediately slammed into the graveyard. Instead, it's the other part of the Goryo's deck, the Goryo's Vengeance part. All right, and it looks like Brian is going to wind up swinging down. Titan player goes down to 18, passing of the turn. I think that's Urza's Saga in hand. Another very powerful card in this land-based deck. There we go. Urza's Saga enters. We still do have the Arboreal Grazer in hand, but it looks like it's just going to be a passing of the turn, and then Tainted Indulgence coming into play here from Brian. Cast that, throws down the Atraxa, so there we go. We draw 2, we discard 1 off of that Tainted Indulgence, and there's one of the big threats coming out from this deck. Looks like Wenhao has to read what Emperor of Bones is going to do, because here we go, pre-combat, trigger, get our Atraxa exiled. We're going to Otawara in response with the trigger on the stack. So that means that no counter going to be placed down because of this adapt. And instead, Brian's just going to be sitting there, can't really respond with any sort of counter magic. That's a land. So boom. Emperor Bones bounce back to hand. Quick Surveil land and passing of the turn. So Wenhao is going to survive the first onslaught and gets rid of the first Atraxa. Just good sequencing coming out from the Titan player as well. Waiting for the exile from combat to go on the stack, and then waiting for Brian to activate the adaptability to bounce the creature before it gets the counter, and therefore we do not wind up having the Atraxa come into play from exile. I think that's a Kessig Wolf run that we wind up seeing from the top of Wenhao Lu's screen. This is, of course, going to be something that, with a lot of mana from your deck, will be giving trample and +X+0 till end of turn. Now, Titan in of itself has trample, can get bigger because of this, but this is also part of the Lumra side of the Amulet Titan deck, where you can now give Lumra trample, where it's a giant creature. All right, so we're going to have Emperor Bones hitting the battlefield again. That was just bounced back into hand. Most importantly, Emperor Bones just says exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. So it is just going to start taking things away from Wenhao's side of the battlefield. Nothing really that you can care about in the graveyard from Wenhao's deck besides a couple of lands that Lumra can bring back, or maybe Aftermath Analyst. It's a very slow way of dealing with those, but we are still going to get at least some value off of this Emperor Bones every single turn. So we did see Construct being made end of turn from Wenhao's side. Then we are going to wind up floating a mana off of this Urza's Saga rather than going for the additional Construct token. And now we're probably looking for Amulet number 2, is what I could assume. Yeah, we're doing the battlefield math. We're tapping the table. I believe there's Vesuva in hand, is what we saw before as well. So Vesuva coming into play, bouncing one of those bounce lands, copying one of the bounce lands, untapping. That creates 4 mana off of those 2 in and of itself. Then you can wind up tapping the Vesuva and your other bounce land. That creates 8. And then we have Kessig Wolf run for 9, 10 off of this floating mana from the Urza's Saga. And now Wenhao just debating, do I have a creature in hand? Do I have a Summoner's Pact? Do I have something I can do with all this mana? All right, just gonna find a map. Crack the map. What do we got? Teleria West. That's transmute. Transmute effect's going to be able to discard this card and then search your library for a card with converted mana cost 0, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle your library. You can only do this as a sorcery. Most importantly, that finds Summoner's Pact. We are going to have Vesuva enter the battlefield as a copy of Simic Growth Chamber.
So I'm floating a green after the transmute.
So we got 1 green left over, and we got the Teleria West going to be transmuted. There's our Summoner's Pact. Now, most importantly, we don't have extra land drops right now. We played the Vesuva for turn.
I have 1 green floating.
We do have 1 green. So you have 3 potential mana available. I know we have an Arboreal Grazer that could give us an additional land drop. We got a Beseiju in hand.
I'm gonna pass turn.
And just, nope, mana goes away. Turn being passed back over to Brian. We are just going to get a fetch here from Brian. That's a Surveil, I believe, down to 13. Now, I mean, we have a Atraxa in hand. We defined a way to get rid of it. Tainted Indulgence is one. Psychic Frog is another. We just bin ourselves a Polluted Delta, untap for turn. What we draw? Looks like a Magic the Gathering card. There's the Atraxa in hand. I think that's an Ephemerate as well. Lots of lands coming out from Brian here. We may have Fetch Surveil, but looks like there might be no Surveil cards left. Is this Atraxa? Atraxa Ephemerate? Ephemerate? Oh, that's unfortunate for Brian. All the pieces you need, except for a way to get one of those big bad Atraxas into the graveyard. Brian on 13, thanks to Fetch Shock Thoughtseize on turn 1.
Who's big immediate wins?
All right, Wenhao taking his turn. What's it got in its hands? And this is a mulligan to 6 that got Thoughtseized immediately from Wenhao. We know there's a Summoner's Pact, Beseiju. Let's take Summoner's Pact, probably prime time. We've only got 2 lands in graveyard, so Lumra's probably not it. We can, now that Vesuva is a Simic Growth Chamber, so we have 5 mana right here. Playing a Growth Chamber that was bounced back to hand gives us 7.
What's in your hand? It's just big creatures.
Going down to 6 to cast the Arboreal Grazer potentially gives us 8 off of another bounce land. So we have any number of things we could do. We could Aftermath Analyst, if that's something that we want to do from our deck. Primeval Titan was the card that looks like it went to the front of Wenhao's deck. I mean, that is one of the namesake cards, so you gotta find it, right? Like that's what the deck is want to do. So Primeval Titan does wind up coming in from Summoner's Pact, going to hand. Double Beseiju, Simic Growth Chamber, Lotus Field, Arboreal Grazer. Looks like that's the mana here. Or the hand.
Simic Growth Chamber.
That's going to untap.
We're
We're going to bounce. Itself. Alrighty. We got Simic colors. We got Gruul colors. Primetime time. So Simic Growth Chamber, Gruul Turf, and the remaining, well, the Vesuva should be a Simic Growth Chamber, so overpaying by 1, I believe, from Wenhao's side, unless you forgot what the Vesuva was copying. Which, to be fair, we've gone through 9 rounds of Magic. Very easy to forget what this is.
No, I did use it. I have something.
So there should be 1 floating mana, and this is going to get 2 lands off this Primeval Titan trigger. Probably going to be finding... What is it? Hanowar Battlements, I think, is the red card, or the red activation cost. Which I believe is what we heard Wenhao saying, floating red. That would be the land that we need for Primeval Titan to gain haste. And then we can get whatever other land that we need. Is it Sunhome that's the one that gives double strike?
Hanowar Battlements?
There's a Hanowar Battlements. Or Hanwar Battlements. Don't know where we're putting the O in there. Man-O-War Battlements. Shifting Woodlands. All right. Those will enter tap from Primeval Titan and then get the trigger from the Amulet of Vigor to untap. And then we have that floating red mana, that one that we quote-unquote overpaid for, gives Primeval Titan haste. Gonna be swinging and getting a trigger.
Attack with these two. Trigger.
So that's 8 damage. We get a trigger from Primeval Titan. What do we got? Is there a red-white source and a red-white land?
This is the Mycosynth.
We can get Mycosynth Garden, all right. You're gonna have to teach me about this one, how. Pay X mana, tap it, Mycosynth Garden becomes a copy of target non-token artifact you control the mana value X. We get Mirror Pool. Even Brian's got to read that one. This one's going to be able to sacrifice itself to copy an instant or sorcery, or sacrifice itself and create a token that's a copy of target creature you control. We are not going to have the mana available to make a copy of Primeval Titan. We got no blocks, it looks like. Brian gonna go to 5.
No mana floating right now.
Maybe go to 4 if we turn the... Oh, no, just gonna... Yeah, as I say, if we turn this Mycosynth Garden into an Amulet of Vigor, that means that this block is going to survive. But, ooh, adapting. And now our Emperor of Bones is not going to be able to Goryo's Vengeance.
2 amulets now.
All right, so Brian goes down to 7. We have a pack trigger that we have to pay for next turn. So we get a Boreal Grazer, Simic Growth Chamber, Bounce our Vesuva. Probably get rid of the Mirror Pool over One House Face.
Here you go.
I'm really gonna need you to speed that up. Yeah. I know you're doing stuff the whole time, but there were.
All right, passing of the turn here. Looks like Judge Charles giving One House just a little bit of slow play warning. We are in on-time finals, but we, as the crew of the store, have been here since about 8 o'clock. Going on hour 11. All right, pass back over here to Brian. Draws return. Got 3 Atroxes and 2 Ephemerates in hand. Alrighty then, that's gonna be game number 1. Going over to Wen Hao Lu.
Offer still on the table for winner to get the invite, loser to get.
I mean, that's what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
Amulet Titan taking game number 1 in this semi-final. Just a quick double check of what our life totals were at the end of that game so I can get them all reset and ready to go for game number 2. All right, so unfortunately, we do not have the deck list from Wen Hao Lu. I do, however, have the deck list from Brian Wang. And even though it is handwritten, I believe I can read it, with 1 copy of Mystical Dispute, 1 copy of Teferi Time Raveler, a copy of Spell Snare, 2 copies of Drannith Magistrate, a copy of Celestial Purge, 2 Wrath of the Skies, a Toxic Deluge, Surgical Extraction, Nihil Spellbomb, and 3 copies of Consigned to Memory. Putting this in with the rest of the deck, which has 3 copies of Force of Negation as some permission spells, 2 copies of Solitude. And I think that might actually be it as far as like interactive spells go. I'm just kind of looking to see if anything was written in the land base. 3 Thoughtseize, 3 Ephemerate, Probably going to keep in all the Thought Seizes. Probably want to keep in like our go big plan with our big old fatties. Now, what I could imagine maybe seeing here is, of course, a couple copies. I mean, Surgical Extraction. You extract away a Primeval Titan. You extract away something like Lumra or Aftermath Analyst if Wenhao is on that style of deck. That's going to be a very powerful thing. If you are on the Lumra version or the Aftermath Analyst version, since we do have the Lotus Fields in Wenhao's deck that we saw, Spell Bomb is going to be something that can affect your graveyard. That may be something we put in there. And then consigned to memory, we have a plethora of artifacts like Amulet of Vigor that we definitely don't want hitting the battlefield, especially after we Thought Seize our opponent and don't see it on turn 1. But that would also, of course, stifle any sort of Titan triggers. So that can be something that we wind up seeing coming out from Brian Wang's sideboard as well. Spell Snares, probably not going to cut it. There's no sorts of damping spheres or anything like that, which would normally be coming in against an Amulet Titan deck if you have that. Instead, with the 3-color mana base of the Esper, Goryo style of the deck, we have a couple of things that we can do. Teferi Time Raveler prevents instant speed shenanigans, but since the Titan deck is going to be doing basically everything with its lands and on its turn, don't think that one's going to be winding coming in. Unless you're assuming that Wenhao is bringing in something on his side that is going to be dealing with things at instant speed, such as potentially upsetting Brian Wang's graveyard. Don't think there's anything off the top of my head besides maybe Endurance that does that, but I don't think you're bringing that in here. I think Wenhao is kind of going hard and fast to the pavement, hoping that he doesn't mulligan down to 6, even though he wound up coming out ahead in that game number 1 when he did so. All right, Wenhao waiting for Brian to decide if he wants to keep his 7 or if he's mulligan down to 6. And Brian's going to wind up scooping those up, shipping them back for 6. It may be Wenhao o'clock. He's keeping 7. All right, so that is going to be one more card than we had in the previous matchup. Both of these decks, though, basically with combo finishes to them, can do very well on lower amounts of resources, however. So it's not the end of the world that we have Brian going down to 6 or 5, unfortunately. Oof. All right.
Is there a commentator in there? Yeah. It's not Matt, though, right? It still matters if someone else.
Oh, it's Tom.
Hey, it's me.
I think Matt fucked off.
So Matt had a wedding to go to, so I hope he's not here still.
Nobody's given me any kind of word, like, since the semifinals, so maybe nobody's in there, but all the cameras, all the equipment's on, so...
It's all right. Brian draws up to 7.
They are here, yes.
Has to put you back. See Goryo's Vengeance, though. And Surveil Land, so that's not the worst thing in the world to start off with, but just going to immediately put, Consigned to Memory did wind up coming in from the sideboard, realizing that you can't hit an Amulet on 1 if you put that one on top of your deck, and well, there it is, Amulet of Vigor. Ooh, all right, we're going to fetch, we're going to potentially shock, and that's going to give us Psychic Frog. So now we have a game plan on the battlefield here for Brian that he didn't necessarily have in the first game. So Psychic Frog is not only going to be a way to discard spells or cards that you want to use that Goryo's Vengeance for, but it's also going to be something that will be generating card advantage if it connects, and then can just potentially just keep growing and pitching all these additional cards that you don't need, so it can apply a clock to Wenhao's life total before they're able to kind of settle down and do their Amulet Titan shenanigans. All right, we had a Surveil Land getting untapped by our Amulet of Vigor. It's a little cheap, if you ask me. Surveils away a land, and then Expedition Map hits the battlefield. Could be finding any sort of number of things here. Maybe potentially a Lotus Field. That would be pretty powerful. We have a One Ring and a Summoner's Pact in Wenhao's hand. So that could be something that winds up finding a Titan pretty early, especially if we're able to float mana, maybe get an additional land drop, and then play a Lotus Field. Surveil Land comes on in from Brian, going to be binning that Plains. Just 1 damage coming across from this teeny tiny little guy of a Psychic Frog, but most importantly, it draws a card. We do have Goryo's Vengeance in hand for Brian, so if that is something very large, we could be seeing it become in charge pretty soon. Instead, it's the Thought Seize. Now we get to see everything that Wenhao has packing, and that is going to be a copy of the One Ring, a Summoner's Pact, and a bunch of mana available. bounce land right there. Some growth chamber on top. There's another Boseiju indoors. Probably, yep, going to be hitting that one ring right there, because that is going to wind up being the one thing that can be cast next turn with a bounce land, and is, of course, going to be something that can get a lot of value. And One House says, uh-oh, that's a face of a Thoughtseize bug if I ever saw one. One ring on the top of the library. This, you imagine, just Simic Growth Chamber, float 2 mana, untap the Growth Chamber, bounce your Surveil land, you have a second Boseiju in hand. Here it goes. Thoughtseize bug hits Brian for the second time in this series. And the one ring. Now kind of giving pause to Brian's Esper Goryo's deck. If you do wind up having something to pitch to that Psychic Frog, it's going to have to wait a turn because that one ring protection is coming into play big time here. All right, we got the Tainted Indulgence coming out from Brian. Do we have the fatty? Atraxa? That gets pitched. That's pretty big. Ooh, Prismatic Ending on the Amulet of Vigor. That's going to be huge. We also wind up passing the turn. Don't connect with the frog. Just want to make sure that it's around. Maybe discard something here. But Prismatic Ending from Brian's deck. Doing work. One House should be taking 1 off of that ring. Taps it to draw 2. But now we're in danger. We don't have our Amulet anymore. Half of our deck's namesake is just gone. And it looks like that the Titan deck might not be doing good for the viewers at home. We might be moving on to a game 3 here. Goryo's Vengeance in hand from Brian. How many cards else does he have? How many more cards can we pitch to our Psychic Frog for lethal? Atraxa is 7 with the haste from Goryo's Vengeance. One House at 18. And I don't think Brian has 10 additional cards in hand, although you can find some off Atraxa. All right, starting out strong, though. We got to replace an Amulet. So game is not over yet. Hot damn. Drawing hot from One House side. All right, we get a Surveil. We get the untap coming in from the Amulet. How's it looking? Is it looking good? All right, just passing the turn after that. Keeps it on top, so it's something we did want to have keeping here. We have Summoner's Pact. Is that Primeval Titan in hand as well? Summoner's Pact, Primeval Titan, a plethora of lands, looks like from the side of One House. Goryo's Vengeance, there it is. Do we have a way to hate the graveyard out? All right, targeting. We got Atraxa. Does it resolve? All right, Summoner's Pact. Is this Endurance? Endurance is found.
Endurance here. Yeah.
And we got the 3 mana. So we're casting Endurance. Bye-bye, Graveyard. Most importantly, Endurance with Reach. Can't even get this frog flying in response. Doesn't really do anything. Goryo's deck can only go to combat. Swings in. Oh, we got nothing in hand, so we're just pitching 3. All right, Frog gets big, though. So we got a 4/5, survives combat, makes the Endurance die. Most importantly, forces One House to shuffle. We want to keep that Surveil on top. And say, pointing out that it is 4 for the pack trigger, and that is a Surveil land and not a bounce land for 2. 2 damage coming across from the One Ring from One House side. And Brian is basically on Goryo's Vengeance. Get back Ulamog. That's a path to victory. Maybe try to grind things out with this Psychic Frog. That's a path to victory. All right, One Ring tapping up to 3 to draw. I mean, One House could rip into, like, Explorer for additional land drop with Growth Chamber and start popping off from there. But Jukabog exiles the graveyard, so Goryo's Vengeance is shut off now. Damn, that's a lot of good lands. Damn, that's a lot of graveyard hate from the deck. All right. Whatever it is that Brian drew, it's good enough. Tainted Indulgence, draw 2, discard 1. So graveyard, so we don't have to worry about the different mana costs in there. We'll be pitching a land. All right, swinging in for 4, draws a card off of our Psychic Frog. Our little guy getting pretty big. It's a 3-turn clock. It can win his face, but we know that there's a Primeval Titan in hand, and we know that that's coming down this turn. I'm gonna say let's start off by drawing 4. So Frog attacked Wenhao down, so Wenhao should be on 9. Off of those ring triggers. Or the ring trigger. Alright, what else you got? I see Simic Growth Chamber. That's good for some mana. What else we got? We have Primetime in hand. We have double Primetime in hand, it looks like. Simic Growth Chamber, play Primetime. Can we give it haste? Can we smash in? Can we win? I am not an Amulet Titan expert. That is just my experience with how the deck goes usually when I am tapped out and have nothing to do. Brian does have 1 mana available. It is white and black, however, so that is not a consigned to memory representation there. We're looking at a couple of lands in our graveyard, so we might be thinking Lumra? We got some math going on. I got 5.
Lotus Fields.
All right.
Gonna make a.
That'll give us 8.
Green. And black.
Sacks his own Lotus Field. All right. So Lumra? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Prime time. All right. Prime time's gonna hit the battlefield. Now we're getting our Henweir Battlements, giving it haste, smashing on in. We got no mana floating.
You're at 15.
We gotta do something though, because we have 4 damage we're potentially taking from our 1 ring, unless we have another copy in our hand. And then this frog, one more card in that graveyard means that that frog can get flying. So we discard a card, exile 3. That will give us the damage we need for ring to kill Wenhao. So
Make a red.
there we go.
Give us haste.
Hammer Battlements, giving haste, Crumbling Necropolis, going to be giving that red mana. We got Primetime Trigger. What are we finding? This is going to be at least 6. Shifting Woodland. So the Mycosynth Lattice, as we did last game.
Where's my Teleria?
Oh, he's looking for Teleria West.
I'm gonna do it.
Otawara instead. Deciding not to get the Shifting Woodlands. This is... Alright, Simic Growth Chamber, Otawara. So Otawara is going to be our insurance plan against the Psychic Frog. So we get that one, float the mana, bounce it back to hand. And then Otawara away the frog. Had all that floating mana. Taking 6. Should go down to 9 from Brian's side. Now it's going to be real hard pressed to do anything here from the Goryo's deck. No fatties in the yard, no way to put anything there, not even a frog to fly. Wenhao passes the turn. Has to go to cleanup. Pitches a plethora of bounce lands from his land hand emporium. And we getting untap and draw. What's we got for Brian? Way to get rid of Primeval Titan would be key. Replaying Psychic Frog is not where you want to be.
No packs this turn. I'm gonna take 4.
One out down to 5 off of the ring.
Cards in hand.
Draws for turn. And we have Lumra in hand. We also got Trample here just from our Keswick Wolf run. Is this just game? There's 2 cards in hand from Brian representing 4 toughness from the side of this Psychic Frog. There's 6 damage. There's way more than 4 lands that we can pump up with this Keswick Wolf run. And then we're just gonna play second One Ring. Playing it smart, making sure there's no removal spell that Brian could wind up casting here. We have One Ring on the stack. What's Brian's got in its hands? And Brian does have 2 Solitude in his main deck, so Solitude white card is a way to survive currently. Maybe Force of Negation. Okay, Consign to Memory. So we're going to consign the ring. So on the stack still.
So you have
One how really thinking about this one. Keswick Wolf Run at this point in time looks like it can, in theory, add 2 power, which only brings our Titan up to 8.
7 more, so 1, 2. This comes in with 2 fields.
We do have Primeval Titan with the ability, as it attacks, to search for 2 more lands. 2 more bounce lands means that we get this Titan up to 6 additional power. That's 12. That forces double discard from Brian, puts him at 1.
So that's 2. I need to do 5 more.
So why not just doing the math
Lotus
right here?
Field plus bounce land kills you. Okay, that's fine.
Saying Lotus Field and Bounce Land kills you.
Go to combat.
So that looks like what we're going to be going. Titan Trigger. Brian just shrugs. Can't really do anything about it.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Pumping it up by 7 gives 13. There we go. Good game. Wen Halu. 3rd seed of the tournament. Coming all the way through with the Amulet Titan deck. Takes down a 33 6-round grueling slog of a tournament. Doesn't mess up his math any step of the way there. Doesn't fumble in the finals and is able to close that one out.